11 a.m. in San Francisco and 7 p.m. in London. I'm Scarlet Fu.
And I'm Oliver Rennick. Welcome to Bloomberg Markets.
We're live in Bloomberg World Headquarters over the next hour here in New York, plus we're covering stories out of Vienna, Moscow, and Los Angeles. Here's what we're watching. Oil climbing to a 17-month high after Saudi Arabia eyes even deeper cuts. Meanwhile, the rally in oil prices having a knock-on effect on bonds, the 10-year yield at one point touching its highest since 2014. ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson said to be under consideration for U.S. Secretary of State. With 2 decades of deal-making in Russia under his belt, the Kremlin is applauding the move, while U.S. lawmakers are already raising some red flags. And President-elect Donald Trump takes aim at Lockheed's F-35 fighter jet program, Trump calling costs out of control, his tweet sending defense stocks lower on the day. All right, U.S. markets close in just under 2 hours. Let's get a check on where equities are trading with Abigail Doolittle. Looks like a mixed read right now.
It is a mixed read, but amazingly enough, Scarlett, this board also has record.
To Douglas Rothacker. He is defense analyst for Bloomberg. As it seems like the president-elect just brought up the F-35 program without much prodding. What's the genesis of this? How did this come about? Why is he bringing this up now?
More weakness in the bond market.
It was quite a bit worse.
That's how the party got started, essentially.
Actually, one part that I'm interested in is the capex. I've heard a lot of people talk about how under Trump administration you might see more capex by companies if they're, pumping this money into the economy and encouraging people to, spend on infrastructure. What does that do to some of the shareholder-friendly type stuff?
The big caps certainly suffer from the stronger dollar because they're so dependent on overseas profits. Yet a stronger dollar means tighter financial conditions, which tends to be worse for small caps.
Yeah, that's a very curious point. It would be perfect that a rising dollar is bad for large cap companies. But if that's happening as the economy is expanding, then can we...
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. We see it in the financial markets. We see it in the reactions to domestic policy, foreign policy. What makes people so convinced suddenly?
Or even how Brexit is going to affect the U.S. economy or the UK economy, that people start telling a positive story. We hear all kinds of stuff, fiscal stimulus and deregulation, even though Trump hasn't really talked much about that. People nonetheless have really glommed on to this fairly positive story without any of the negative sides. What makes us do that?
Tank, the economy would head into recession. One person who disagreed, one contrarian, was David Wu. He is global rates and currencies research head at...
Forecast, especially in the event of a Donald Trump victory, was closest to being correct. Most people saw doom and gloom. I want to go into this chart. It's a look at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch multi-asset strategy 2x leverage index, basically a risk parity index that has a big sort of bond component, really underperformed. And in my view, even more than the equity rally, the defining aspect of this
stage of the rotation look like? If there's still room to go, what will it look like in the next stage versus what we already saw?
Right. That's getting people excited about the Japanese economy. I think the verdict on Abenomics is mixed at best. Do you think that this cocktail, as you put it, will actually translate? Why will it translate?
52. They need 60 to prevent filibuster. So if not,
could argue that it's starting to peter out, or it was before this election result.
I mean, Scarlett,
people just don't have the trade on, or they were caught really offsides. And I mean, we know that the people were wildly bullish on bonds. Thank you for staying with us. So. The first thing that Donald Trump has truly done is just totally turned over the table on China, being very explicit that the one China policy is not sacrosanct. On issues last week, we got the headline about limits on ATM withdrawals in Macau. That in itself probably not a huge thing, but signifying perhaps a much deeper concern about the level of capital outflows. How bad is it right now for the country? And how much, what more do you expect to see on this front?
Joe, you just hit the nail on. This time, 20% of apartments sold over...
To cracking down on capital outflows. What are China's next steps in 2017? They can't predict what Donald Trump is going to do next. So what did they do to proceed with what they need to do to reform the economy? It's the communication policy that they have overall that has evolved over time to include dots.
Yes, the dots are innovations that came about during the crisis. The dots are one of them. The press conferences was another innovation. But they obviously seem to have their drawbacks. Some would argue that the dots sort of may have forced them into a December hike because they had that dot out there. The press conference creates the year, even though they insist otherwise. Were these innovations valuable during the crisis period and have perhaps outlived their usefulness, or in retrospect did not fully serve what they...
2 or 3 meetings yet, and no one
would want to even buy.
Oil is having a massive year. In your view, I mean, obviously the Fed strips out headline and really looks at core, but in your view, how much does rising oil, rising gas prices play into inflation expectations?
It is Monday. When we look ahead to tomorrow, don't miss this coming out over
Announcement itself.
In the meantime, that is all for What You Missed. Thanks for watching.
Have a great